Welcome to another episode, 3rd of December 2025. And Lara, today we want to talk about the thing we say we wanted to talk about today, right? Which is Sabah election, which, by the way, we both didn't really follow in depth, but the result is out already. And one of the things I was just making a note is that things seem to change, and yet things seems to be totally unchanged with the election. So, we saw the rise of nationalism, Sabah Sarawak, nothing unusual. And so I thought we want to kind of look at the whole, from a broader perspective, just 4 or 5 questions, right? And so the first one I want to start with just your overall feeling. And we're not going into the granular analysis. A lot of blog, a lot of newspaper, a lot of opinion are looking. But what's your reaction? Having not follow in depth, and then you get a result. Are you surprised? Are you not surprised? Or some of the things that you observe?
I think it's not overly surprising. Although we're not following too much into this whole election cycle, it's also not too surprising given that the prior voices were very much like, hey, what's the benefit for Sabahan? And also then obviously there is that corruption cases and trials, whatnot. So I think with that, it's not like overly surprising. I think maybe there were some elements of sabotage, but I wouldn't say it's like totally like out of the norm for those who are from East Malaysia, in the sense that, I do agree there is definitely a rise in Sabah nationalism, and therefore I think it's that people are at such a position. I think it's almost like you're at a crossroad and you begin to think, hey, do I put the nation first, or do I actually think I'm first a Sabahan and things like that? So I felt like there is a bit of that sort of posturing, but it's also not. I think it's a good direction in the sense that we are like a maturing democracy. So I think even for Sabahan, they also have to like chart a pathway, because I think if we compare Sabah and Sarawak, I think maybe Sabah is at I suppose there is like a lot of West Malaysia politics infiltration, if we could even use that word.
Because since 1991, remember when PBS kind of rebelled and kind of came out from Barisan Nasional, then UMNO was given the golden opportunity to come in and things like that. But one of the things, of course, over the years, they always say Sabah and Sarawak are fixed deposit for the incumbent and things like that. And you hear people, supposedly, they feel like they are the progressive, and they always criticize Sarawakian and Sabahan for voting for infrastructure, for voting for money. But democracy is like that, right? You vote for what you want. And you cannot say, for example, I heard a lot of criticism about, Sabahan still support corruption and things like that. But it's more nuanced than that, right? It's like they look at who can do the job. And for some people, it's like corruption is everywhere. I'm just going to choose the best
The
possible.
lesser evil.
Yeah. So I just feel like there's those people, the philosophical people, the rights people, the NGO people. Sometimes, and to be fair, this time they were not like really criticizing the voters. In fact, most of the comments I saw, like what you were saying, that it was a good progress for the state. People chose, but Thomas Jefferson also say you get the government you deserve.
Exactly.
Based on what you vote, right? And now, then the next question kind of lead towards that is because we have to compare with the last Sarawak election, where GPS basically won every seat except 2 state seats in Kuching. But there was a COVID time, a lot of people cannot travel and things like that. But this time, very, very similar, right? You basically have the Sabah-based parties dominating, and Malayan-based party only obtain. If you don't include Barisan Nasional, right?
Yeah.
It's like they almost want to portray themselves as local. Now, of course, all the candidates are local, but what do you make of it? Can Barisan Nasional honestly say they are local Sabahan party?
No, I think so. I don't think so. As in, like,
they've been there since 1991, long enough. But can they? DAP was there even longer.
exactly. I feel like there is a bit of shift. I mean, if you were to accuse them of like, hey, I mean, Sabahan is still very much like don't care about the corruption issues. I mean, there's a bit of shift. I mean, Barisan Nasional also didn't do very, very well. Also, I mean, we don't even talk about Pakatan Harapan first. I mean, even Barisan Nasional, I think people are a bit wary of it and kind of like shifting away from it instead of being like the usual fixed deposit for BN. I mean, they also don't no longer enjoy that sort of perks anymore in Sabah. So I feel like it's a bit of decoupling, almost like there is. I think in a way it's a good testimony to our prime minister as well because decentralization has always been a theme. But the thing is, I mean, obviously the party suffer quite a fair bit as well, taking a stink. But I feel it's kind of like that they're moving away from it, and so I feel it is kind of like a good thing.
Yeah, and we talk about nationalism in both Sabah and Sarawak, and we kind of cover those issues every now and then in this podcast, right? I mean, we both feel like there is still a role for Malaysia, for the federations, and people shouldn't be. I mean, by all means, I think if you want to be like Sabah first, you want to be Sarawak first, or you want to be Selangor first, I don't know, can you be Klang Valley first, that kind of thing. I don't think it's wrong because that's where you are, you want the best for your locality. But then I guess what we're trying to say is, look, it shouldn't, we should remember there is still a nation, there is still a federation. And if one part is not doing well, it affects the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's like actually. I mean, we are still very much a big government sort of structure. I mean, I'm not saying that we're like moving away from it entirely just because there is a rise of like Sabah parties that are more at the dominant position right now. It is more like I think there is more decentralization than credit is due in the sense that we don't want so much of federal intervention into our local affairs and things like that. I think it's like maybe it might even path a good sort of pathway to local elections that we have been like talking so much in this show.
And one of the things that is quite interesting about this Sabah election for me is really you look at GRS with Hajiji, then you look at Shafi with Warisan, and both of them came out from UMNO. And the other day when we're talking with David Tian and we're just talking about how you have the pro-independence parties in Sarawak, and to their credit, the last few elections, very few of their candidates lose their deposit. So that means they're gaining support. But at the same time, if you are totally not from establishment, it seems like there is still that hurdle that is very, very difficult to overcome in Malaysia. Do you agree that like Shafi, like even like in Sarawak, they all kind of rebrand themselves, and now we are totally local party and never associated with Barisan Nasional. I mean, they managed to do that, but do you feel like it is really difficult for non-establishment political entity to really make a dent in a Malaysian kind of political climate?
Yeah, sure, I think so. I mean, I'm just reminded of how initially Trump was just thinking about like,
Yeah, I was thinking about that
maybe
also.
like a third party and things like that. But the fact is, you're going against a whole big machinery, and I don't think it's so easy to like just like change it like that. And so you do need to be a bit like.
So the Shafi Warisan, the Hajiji GRS, the GPS model seems like the way to go. I mean, you have a whole host of pro-independent Sabahan party. I mean, there's a few Sabah first. Of course, UPCO did okay, but the rest are pretty much wiped out. So I guess like what you were saying, that the whole spirit of big government still kind of dominate the consciousness of our people. Maybe one day, but even American politics cannot really deal with third force.
Exactly.
But anyway, now the third thing, I mean, we talk about corruption, and I think we have to deal with this because it's like what I was saying earlier on, it's a bit nuanced, right? So let me ask you this: do you think there's a contradiction? Because like some people kind of look at how DAP was wiped out in the urban area, and they attribute that to lack of reform by Mamdani. But actually, people who feel lack of reform are maybe just the urban Chinese. Then, on the other hand, you have GRS, people implicated in the water utility, those days, Musa, with all the cash, and then you have the mining scandal. Of course, not quite proven because the whistleblower not quite reliable, right? the Albert guy. But nevertheless, to say that people are unhappy due to corruption, but on the other hand, it seems like a large chunk of voters are still voting for that. So what do you make of that? Is it basically maybe different blocks of voter, or for some places, it is simply not a major consideration?
I think maybe it is not so big of a consideration. I mean, because there are many, many very, very rural places in Sabah, and you do need to rely on quote unquote establishment to actually build up the infrastructure over there. I mean, if you can't even enjoy the basic amenities and things like that, I mean, people won't be thinking so much globally about corruption. I mean, because it's like, it doesn't really affect them. It's just like when you are saying, okay, there is like a billion ringgit corruption cases that's going on, but it's like, how many people you can even comprehend how many zeros there are in a billion?
Yep.
So I think it's like that sort of nuance, in a sense that it's like too big of an issue to even make it an issue. So I feel like maybe because of that, people are a bit like, I guess like not very much paying
So maybe
attention
they feel
to
like
it.
corruption is everywhere. It cannot really be changed. And so how do you think we can? I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier on, which we kind of talk so often here, is if you give people the power to participate in a third government local election, then I think people will start to feel like, hey, the council is giving tender and things like that, not just giving to all the friends and families of related politicians. Then they may start to feel like, hey, we actually have a role to stop corruption. But at the moment, do you think it's fair to say that so many people, maybe including us also, we are like so used to corruption?
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit more gray in that sense, as in like you are in certain industry and you do need to rely on certain authority to grant you certain approval and things like that. I mean, unless you're like,
Construction.
yeah, unless you're like wanting to shift completely away from it, or
I mean, we've seen people who try to. It just kind of reminded me of a story. I was just reading it today, and because some people were doing a lot of analysis on the whole fallout with DAP, and I think one of the there's a Chinese version of a biography for Lin Keqiang, but someone else wrote it. And during that gathering, and I think PMS was there, and I think this was, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago. And everyone at that time already was mentioning that the reforms were not fast enough. And I think PMS went to the stage and told the story of French Revolution. And basically he's trying to say that if you reform too fast, the whole thing will crumble. So basically, I think he's just telling the people that, you don't expect too fast of a reform. So people are kind of thinking about that moment and try to put context to what's happening right now.
I mean, it's not too wrong as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's not wrong.
I do agree that I mean, if you want to do a thorough reformation, it has to start from foundational issues. And the fact is, in this nation, I mean, I think people don't really have that freedom to pursue happiness, if you really were being honest about this whole thing. And so if there are so many roadblocks, I think shouldn't we remove the roadblocks first before you even begin to think about, like, okay, I mean, you can eat luxurious items. I mean, people are not even in the capacity to think about that sort of luxury. So you should like remove some of these roadblocks first. And
some of the behavior by Mamdani and PMS kind of like want to take away that ability to pursue happiness. And you talk about very, very simple stuff like, additional tax on imported food. And then when people point out actually imported food is cheaper, all these kind of things, which is very, very small things, but it kind of hit the nerve or the emotion of people.
But I guess also another thing, what we can begin to think about is probably like we should demand some form of transparency from our government. I mean, obviously we are not like gonna turn into small government in one day. Why not start with something that is a bit more like, hey, if there is a bit of some sort of participation through like transparency, accountability, then actually it can help people to be a bit more aware of, oh, okay, actually that's what it takes to run a government, and therefore maybe people are a bit more I wouldn't say sympathetic, but it's like at least they have some sort of appreciation of what's going on, and that maybe could pave a way for like local elections.
So let's talk about that point and also the next one, which is we want to kind of move out a little bit and talk about PMS because so do you think it's fair to say that with the result, I mean the whole Pakatan Harapan got one seat, the whole Perikatan got one seat. I mean, of course, Perikatan has been in the rut for a while, but they were kind. I mean, of course, Mamdani was kind of like tying up with GRS, so they don't sit for every. They don't contest in every seat, but still won. It's pretty pathetic, right? It's won by an ex-UMNO some more. So is it fair to say that PMS is under some pressure at this stage?
I think so. I mean,
we just talk about some of the good things he has done, with Trump, with the economy, and kind of like you look at general investment mood is like people are saying, look, Malaysia, we can invest in Malaysia. The tariff kind of thing, the uncertainty is gone, and not so much rhetoric on Gaza and things like that. I mean, honestly, I think that's quite obvious, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, the subsidy rationalization it is ongoing. But then all of a sudden you are hit with the reality, and I think the urban Chinese voters show that they can make a difference. If just a swing. In fact, I was just reading some analysis. They say the Chinese urban swing is up to 54%.
Wow.
So when we say swing, I don't think all of them went to vote for Warisan. I think a lot of them just simply don't vote. So that will be kind of scary. I mean, I just think about places like Seputeh, places where you think there's no way they can lose. But the last Sarawak state election, Palawan, my area, which previously so comfortable. So anything can happen, right? So what do you think? I mean, kind of tie back to what you were saying, right? How do you provide some transparency? Because I don't know. Do you think it's a communication problem? People, with Saifuddin, with Fahmi, these are just terrible communicator all the time. I mean, the whole thing with MACC treating. I mean, Albert Tay is not an angel, okay, but he is being portrayed as a very sympathetic figure because MACC was just kind of like behaving very badly. Then you. So do you think it's a communication problem? It's a transparency problem, but what can PMS do? Or what should he do?
I mean, I think first of all, everyone has to understand that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about persuasion at the public square. I mean, if you can't even command a certain attention to what you want them to believe, I suppose, I think that's a very, very poor communication. I do think he does need to replace the Minister of Communication. And
but what do you make of his reaction to Sabah election? Him and Anthony Loke, which I felt was very, very poor response. Like some sort of like Anthony Loke just say we have to be introspective and things like that. But it's like how it's like. And then they will say, look, some show is already being charged and handcuffed. So what? It's like people don't care about Samso. It is something broader, right? And somehow that is not being communicated well enough.
Well, actually, something that kind of like came to my mind was, do you reckon it's like people are actually unhappy about because if you talk about like whole PH, I think they are very much rooted in socialism. I think people are like really not quite happy about that sort of foundational values that you're trying to portray, and therefore they are like wanting to move away from perhaps maybe let's try a bit of like capitalism sort of experiment and things like that. So I feel there is a bit of that sort of pushback. I mean, obviously the introspection has to come from the place where, hey, is our policy even appealing to these people? Is our value even appealing to these people? And I mean, what if like, I guess like they should have done more, and they should have like tried to persuade a bit more. Like, hey, I mean, if you're a hard seller for socialism, you should say why socialism is good, and then how can we get that sort of money to actually distribute the money. So I feel like there should be that sort of like presentation. I guess it's just poor presentation.
Very, very interesting you mentioned this because every time you see economic hardship, so that's why New York kind of voted Mamdani in, and it's because the young people cannot afford mortgage, the young people doesn't have accommodation and things like that. So I definitely agree with you that Mamdani's foundation seems to be rooted in socialism, and that's our position on socialism is very, very clear because eventually the money runs out, and you just have to keep taxing people and things like that. So DAP, of course, you have the two faction, right? You have the socialist faction, but they also have a lot of the middle class, the businessmen, the factory owners. They are not for socialism. So every now and then, in construction industry, I think, and many industry, you hear people say Najib is better. You hear that all the time, and I think it is alluding to the fact that he allowed business to run. Maybe more corruption and things like that, but he's not like taking money. Of course, he did the YNDB and things like that. I mean, everyone does some sort of populist, but how much should you be doing? And are you going to impact people's ability to find livelihood? So, I mean, after 50, 60 years of socialism worldwide, I mean, people say about China, but China is not socialist.
No.
China is a state-run enterprise. They're very much capitalist, but the board of director is CCP. So that's very different from socialist. So the kind of, you want to do this, you want to help the hardcore poor, which is fine, but then you keep on harping about Mahakaya and things like that. You keep on, going excessive tax enforcement and those kind of things. So, I guess in a way you can say maybe they are not quite sure what they want to do.
I guess it's also like you're not weeding out the root issue. You're just basically like trying to cure the symptom and that's it. And so that actually is posing a lot of hardship on the people.
Indeed. And that's not easy to solve because, the foundation goes back to May 13, to NEP and things like that. Whoever wants to solve this must make some very hard decision, I guess. But anyway, we have the last question today. Last topic, which is talking about DAP itself. And remember, the last time we kind of focused on DAP was just before their CEC election, right?
Exactly.
So here's the thing. To frame the question as we conclude today's episode, do you think their time outside Malaya is over?
That's a tough question. I don't think so. I think maybe. The
maybe
test
we have to
will
wait for
definitely-
Sarawak State election
Exactly,
to see.
the test will be at Sarawak State
Because the last
election.
election doesn't count, all of us couldn't go back. And honestly, I could still see them win in some of the seats, like in Cebu. But how do you rebrand yourself, And you look at some people, like for Warisan, Jones won used to be from DAP. So he won under Warisan. So you see, it's possible, but do you think rebranding is compulsory?
I think so.
You mean that means cannot contest under DAP flag?
I wouldn't say like you can't compete under DAP flag.
In Sabah and Sarawak.
I think you probably can. But it's just that I think it goes back to the value and things like that. It has to be something that is relatable to the people there. So I think if you can't be relatable, then and you're becoming irrelevant, So I feel like that part is the thing that they need to rebrand, the relevance to the people.
And they need to do the ground. Sadly, we talk about our representative in our town. Not great,
Very
right?
quiet.
The last few rounds, not great. And they were just like kind of passive and people kind of voted them just as a charity vote so that there's some sort of opposition to GPS. But that's not how you want to be voted in, right? You want to have a reasonable voice. And to be fair, I think over the years, when I say over the years, I'm talking about the last 40, 50 years, they did have some contribution in terms of, fighting for land title rights and things like that, which eventually, the previous premier, Adnan, he allowed for very, very easy land renewal. DAP can claim some credit for that, but then they lost like a major fighting issue. So I mean, if you have a big issue that you don't need to fight anymore, actually it's to your credit because you actually make it happen, right?
Exactly.
I mean, like Wilberforce kind of settled the slavery issue. Then they don't need to fight anymore. So you reckon we need to see? I mean, of course, you're going to have Malacca, Johor election first, and even right now, people are saying that look, you talk about Kota Malacca, you talk about JB, you talk about Senai, you talk about all those kind of places. No guarantee you can win.
But do you reckon it's becoming more regional party sort of contest?
In a way, when we talk about this kind of Sabah first, Sarawak first, I think it's kind of spilling to other places also. So even though it's the you talk about Pahang, Johor, Melaka, Penang, actually every now and then you hear Penang, I would say Penang first also, right?
Yeah.
They want to be in that kind of category. So it's not a bad thing because you should be more, I mean, local politics first, then national politics. It should always be like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Turning Point USA, I mean, they are very political in the sense that they are also like very focused on some of the swing states like Arizona,
Yes.
where Charlie Kirk was from, and basically he's like very much focused on like at the end of the day, it's like nothing beats word of mouth. I think they firmly believe it. So I
Yep.
feel like the rebranding should really come from that perspective, as in like there should be a word of mouth sort of like grassroots movement where people can begin to like knock on the door like, hey, I mean, like maybe there's one more vote for this, there's one more vote for this.
Yeah.
So instead of like making people sit idle on the fence, I think that's really not a good strategy because it's like the introspection has to mean something. So I feel like that part is the thing that they do need to like seriously take into consideration, because otherwise they may face an opportunity of wipe out.
Yeah, I mean, people always say the turun padan only during campaign period. But of course, to be fair, I mean, especially in West Malaysia, DAP, most of the candidate, most of those who have a seat at state or federal level, they do have service center and things like that. I think they are one of the more community involved party in Malaysia. But unfortunately, their voter base are also the most, I don't know, I don't want to use the word emotional, but it's really the urban people, the Chinese urban, the Indian urban who kind of vote them are the most disillusioned, and that's why they are the one who kind of show the most contempt. But there's also the allegation that ever since they're part of federal government, they sort of didn't do their work. I mean, for lack of a better word. I mean, do you think that's a fair statement?
I wouldn't say it's unfounded.
It's a perception, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's
No,
like entirely
okay.
unfounded, I suppose.
So there's a bit like, I mean, it's not like they're not working. I think it's more like, because we're in the government, we want to, all this while their argument is want to give PMS a bit of opportunity, don't give him so much pressure and things like that. But I just find it interesting that today you see both Kapal Singh children were making a lot of noise today, right? Gorbing, talking about he's going to talk to Saifuddin about Albert Tay, maybe, release a CCTV and then the other, was just talking about, government shouldn't be just behaving too badly. So do you think that's the beginning of some pushback from DAP?
I think so.
I mean, they have to, it's a matter of their survival, right? So, I mean, are we going to see the more senior people, Anthony Locke, Ngan Komeng, these people have senior position in government? I mean, they should do something, right?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I don't believe that you can just like don't want to do anything at all.
Because you look worldwide, right? Whenever you have coalition governments, and even in Australia, you have coalition government, and UK, you should use that as a leverage to say that look, we cannot. I know in Malaysia we are over centralized. PMO has so much power, but this is a wake up call that they still have 2 more years. Otherwise, they may not be another Mamdani term, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a midterm election after all.
Yeah, so I think then of course some people kind of say, well, Sabah, you cannot put it in a national context. But a lot of people felt like it is a warning. Do you tend to agree?
Yes, most definitely.
So anyway, we shall see how it goes, and probably we should get our friend David Tian back and
Yeah, we
just
should.
and hear some of his analysis, because I'm interested to see where and what the ground people are talking about, the political ground people. I think the normal people kind of like were just fed up, and then we'll see. I mean, there's also rumor of cabinet reshuffling and things like that. So yeah, we shall see. So I think that's all the time we have for today. So we shall come back again next week.
Yes, we should.
Okay, bye bye for now.
Bye bye.